All right, what's up? This is gonna be one for the record books. um, I was having a great chat with some people this morning, and there are a bunch of new things I've learned that I know if you just watch this video, take some notes, you're probably gonna want to watch this one twice. This would be my suggestion, just to frame this, is there's a whole more expanded way to view the world, and it's going to really help you liberate yourself from the turmoil and the kind of the lingering shitty feeling that you have of like, man, is the world out to get me? Like, you kind of feel separate from stuff, feel some doubt, feel some fear. And sometimes you're more honest with yourself than others. Sometimes you get pretty good when, you got your Starbucks and, you're caffeinated and you're ready to take on the day. It's very different than when you're alone, mind is racing, and you're like having an existential crisis or having a panic attack. And so this video here is going to lay some really cool groundwork for what is a more advanced way that you can see the world, but also interact with the world and get a different outcome. And my purpose for this, and really for all my videos, if you watch my YouTube and everything I do with content and all that, is I'm here to create a better world, like fundamentally. And I'm not just saying that lightly. Like, I'm here so we can really change the system. What does that mean? I'll get into that over time. You can watch my other videos on that. But I see a world where any kid, no matter where they're born, can have a life of dignity, an awesome life. They can be highly educated. They can have really unlimited opportunity within reason, right? We still live in reality, so you can't go sprout wings and go fly away. But what if every kid could be able to pick up any book and read it, or learn how to start a business, or have confidence and charisma and skills? That's the world that I'm creating that at home. So I'm not just projecting this outside, but like me, my wife, my son, Aristotle, we have another kid on the way, where we're creating that here. And as I've been doing that, it's forced me to level up. And so I'm going to share with you some of the coolest insights I've had recently in no particular order. There's going to be some randomness to it, just as I see what is the important points to bring up. But buckle up. Let's dive in. So first things first is I got a cool message 2 minutes before I filmed this, which I'm really glad I got it. It's from this guy I know named William, and he's in the Self-Perfected group. And I was giving him some lists of stuff that he can use. There's a program we use called TechnoTutor, and there's a way you basically can use it to reprogram your mind. That's simply what it is. People have all sorts of takes on what that means, right? Some people are like, oh my God, this is some like brainwashing tool. Other people go, holy shit, this is so cool. I wish I had this my whole life so I didn't have to waste all my time in school. Regardless of your opinion of it, nonetheless, that's what it does. And so I gave him a list because he's in our Self-Perfected group. And so he's like wanting to connect with more people locally in his community. And so I gave him a list of like 30 ways to phrase affirmations to then imprint into his subconscious mind, unconscious mind. So now he's thinking differently. And he sent me a message this morning. I'm not going to put the screenshot in here, but he's basically like, hey, that shifted my brain. He's like, I'm doing this one every day. I'm like, that's cool, because that I knew that would have that effect on him. But I'm bringing this up because that's the power of real learning. Is it actually has a shift on your brain. It has a shift on the architecture and the structure of how you perceive reality. And when it's more effective, as in it's more aligned with the goals that you have, it shifts you. So if you want to know more about that, message me. I can actually explain what that is to you, because that has been the number one tool that has changed my life by far. I used to be the guy where I would read 50 to 100 books a year, and I would read the books and I would underline them and take notes out of fear that I wasn't going to be able to remember it at the time I needed it. Okay, big point. I used to take notes and read books out of fear of like, I don't think it's sticking. That's what TechnoTutor changed for me. And so now, though, because I've been doing this for 4 years, here's now the whole next level. It's called worldly wisdom. Worldly wisdom. So when you can combine proper learning, which is TechnoTutor, because it's getting at that natural learning ability, where you can actually integrate information to the unconscious. So it's automatic. It's like if I ask you, what's your name? Your name is Steve. You're like, oh, Steve. Duh. But if I were to ask you, hey, can you explain what the compound, what compound interest is to me? You're like, some sort of equation, and like over time it gets better. It's like you have to think about it. But when you can integrate that information, so now it's integrated knowledge, then it's there at your mental fingertips. You can use it when you make decisions, when it really counts. So that's what I mean by integrated knowledge. That's programming, and that's where TechnoTutor comes in, which is part of this. The other part is then this principle that is investigate everything and keep what's best. Investigate everything, keep what's best. Okay, this has been attributed to Jesus. This has been attributed throughout the ages, but this is now the main point I want to get across in this video. It's called Worldly Wisdom. I got that first from Charlie Munger, R.I.P. Charlie. He was Warren Buffett's business partner. He just died, I don't know, a couple months ago. But he explains how when you can read and pull from vast fields, you can then start to synthesize that knowledge, and it actually serves as a structure by which you can interpret the world. He called it a lattice work for hanging ideas. So when you have mental models, such as, let's say, if you ever heard of the halo effect, or commitment consistency bias, or the confirmation bias, these different ways where humans will see the world, or we will make errors in our judgment, the more of those you have integrated, the more of those you understand, it's a lattice work. If you don't know what a lattice is, it's like if you ever seen someone have those like crisscross wooden pattern, like in a garden, right? And it's like that crisscross wooden structure where like tomatoes will grow or cucumbers will grow or whatever. It's like we have them in our garden. Again, if I had some like proper content team, they'd like put in cool stuff. But part of the value of this video too is I'm just speaking from the heart. I'm just speaking from what I see is real. And as you have this lattice work that you develop through reading different books, through having different narratives, different points of view, you can now start to hang ideas there to then test them. And so the lattice work that I've been building out now has been around taking information and like integrating information, like studying the right material, to then be able to now cast a better narrative of where the world is headed, where I'm headed, what we're creating. Because when you have a compelling vision, people can then rally around that and to change the world and to have a better world for my son and your kids and the future generations. There's a more compelling vision that's been unfolding. And I made a video a month ago called The New Frontier, which is, that's a nice kind of precursor to this. And I'm still working it out, but I want to document the journey so y'all can see, like at some point, I know I will be insanely wealthy and able to use that money to like create a better distribution system in the world. So that way we can get actual education to people. We can get actual like breakthroughs to people, like what people really need to thrive. I know that we'll get there. Like we are getting there, but I'm documenting the journey so that people can see along the way. I'm just a normal guy, but I'm just insanely obsessed with becoming the best version of myself and like taking that all the way and really investigating things. And so, here's some ideas then that will start to fuse this together. One is called power reading. I do this with my friends, like literally for fun. This is what we will do when we will hang out. I have like a pretty extensive library in our house and it's growing. By the way, pro tip, if you live in America, there's a place called Goodwill and like people like donate stuff there. They typically have a pretty awesome book section and you can get awesome books and it's like $1 or $2 per book. Also for kids books too. So vocabulary, I'm going to like jump all over, but just enjoy the ride. Okay. Vocabulary is so essential. Vocabulary is literally the building blocks of the world. You were programmed, if you went through public school, to think vocabulary is like a separate class you take to learn some words. No, vocabulary is everything. Math class, science, even PE, recess, learn how to interact with other students or whatever. Like that's all vocabulary. Vocabulary is everything. It's like, look at something in your world. There's a word for it. And so that's what I mean by vocabulary. So there's a ton of research done on how vocabulary is the most important thing that a kid can be exposed to, where kids can have these are now building blocks. Like look at each word as a tool by which you can do things. And so I have been obsessed with building vocabulary. I didn't even know that I was for a while, because I got really into like the whole Knowledge Society thing and Tai Lopez, and I did Tai's mastermind for a year, and I saw that, okay, it makes sense that the more you read, like the more that you will like the more you'll be able to do and understand. By the way, I just gotta check the time. Okay, cool. I have a meeting in like 15 minutes, so I gotta keep this fairly brief. Okay, just cut out there. So vocabulary is like these building blocks, right? So there's this lattice work. Let's say vocabulary is like the pieces that build up that lattice work of how you now can see reality. And there's delusional lattice work, and there's like real lattice work. That's where self-honesty comes in, and you have to like test ideas. But I'm just throwing this out there so you can start to see this for yourself. So you got vocabulary is the building blocks, okay? But then that vocabulary starts to build through books and through your accumulated knowledge. So now, this idea of the power read. So I will go to different, I've assembled books over the years. I don't even know how many books we have in our home, but it's like all these different streams of vocabulary you're getting through these books. So I'll have books on biographies on Elon Musk or, Steve Jobs or Theodore Roosevelt or something. But then I'll have books on learning like NLP. And then I'll have a book on explaining where, I don't know, everything. Like we have books on almost everything. What's valuable about that is then there's an idea of a power read. So a power read is where you and your friends, it's like a different way of looking at reading. Because most times people have the curse of thinking, oh, if I open a book, I have to start on page 1, chapter 1, read the table of contents, whatever, and then you like go through the book. And most books suck. Like most books have fluff. There's some editor that knows this is what it's going to take to get it on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's a lot of fluff. But most books have at least a couple good gems. Or there's a phrase, if you look through the dirt, you find the gold. You're not looking for the dirt, you're looking for the gold. So you got to remember that when you're digging for gold. So power reading is like you set a timer for, let's say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You say, okay, I'm gonna extract all the knowledge I can from this book, all the wisdom, and I'm going to hunt for that gold. So it means maybe you read the first and last sentence of a couple paragraphs, because you can usually get a good gist of things from that. And then you'll also you maybe read different chapter titles, or maybe you literally flip to just a random page and read, which is pretty cool. But then you're hunting for it, and you're looking for like the gems that you can take to then apply to the next point in your life you want to resolve. So it helps to have something in your mind kind of floating there at which you're solving for. Such as, hey, I want to reach my next level of responsibility as a father, right? So I'm going to now read this book with that understanding. Or you might just be like, hey, I'm just going to look for the most inspiring idea, or I'm going to look for something that's going to really challenge me. So you're kind of looking for it, and then you use that book as material to cross-reference with. And then, so then we'll all read, right? So like, let's say there's 5 of us, read for 5 minutes, and then you get the gems, and then you share with each other what you got. But then the next level is then you start to fuse those ideas together. So there's a phenomenal book. I recommend it to everybody. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Where Good Ideas Come From by Steven Johnson. And they explain how some of the greatest breakthroughs in minds of history, these are people that read voraciously as children. I mean, look at Elon Musk, Steve, well, I don't know about Steve, but Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, I learned Theodore Roosevelt had read like 20,000 books. Even Cat Williams, the comedian, he had read like another insane amount of books. But these are like Elon and some of these guys, they're seen as these geniuses that are like somehow like creating this new world, casting this vision. It's because when they were a kid, when they still had their learning ability open, they were able to force a bunch of information in there, by which it's now that lattice work by which they can see a better, see a new future. It's debatable if going to Mars is better, but nonetheless, that's the book Where Good Ideas Come From explains this, and it explains that a good idea is not really in isolation. A good idea comes from putting more pieces on the table. So you can start to synthesize information together, and then new ideas will pop from that. It's pretty cool. There's almost like a hierarchy of ideas. So the more pieces you can put on the table, see how they fit together, it's great. Now, that idea of the power read, I got it from some mastermind I was in a long time ago. I invested a lot of money in learning. But it fits in with this idea of where good ideas come from. And that then started to lead me to understand, okay, the more books I can get, the more I can learn, the more I can process this information too. Again, that's where TechnoTutor comes in. So you can actually process it real time. It's freaking amazing. So then I would take everything I'd learned from my power reading sessions. I would take everything from my books, and typically now once a day for at least 30 minutes a day, I'll read. I read anything. I read about marketing, I'll read about business, I'll read about content, but I'll also just read. I'm reading a book on world mythology right now. I'm reading Psycho-Cybernetics for probably the 12th time. So so I'll take this information, I'll then learn it. And I actually made a video on this a while ago of like how, I don't know, something about reading, but I explained how I do the process with TechnoTutor. So that's a different video. But for this one, I more want to cast a vision of how you can become really elite and how you see the world. And you can then be really good at being a leader, because grassroots is how we change the world too. So you got to be a compelling person with a compelling vision. Because if your ability to cast a vision sucks, no one's going to follow you. No one's going to listen to you. And so let's change that. But you do that by getting more information into the system. And then over time, you'll start to get good at sharing. So now there's also then, so I got this from one of the things I was reading too. It's called From Thinking Fast and Slow. And some of these books are so friggin', they're like painful to read. But he gives this cool idea. I forget even the name of the author, but it's pretty, I think Daniel Kahneman, I think is the author. He talks about like system 1 thinking and system 2 thinking. Where system 1 is like that slow hunch. It's like you go on a long walk, you unplug from everything, and you'll start to get good ideas to pop up. Or like if you're working out or you're like taking a shower, it's like that slower, more unconscious piece. And then system 2 thinking is like that, like real time, you like ask a question. And he gives a great example. So he would go for a walk for like four miles a day or something. And that was like his thinking time. And he would, let's say you're walking together with him and you're just like talking about life, talking about things. It's a very helpful way to process your mind and have breakthroughs. But then you will, he's like, now imagine you're on a walk and someone says, okay, well, what's 17 times 41? It's like they'll actually stop and they'll think, because there's a certain cognitive load or cognitive strain on which it's like your body and your mind will put energy towards things. And so if you have to think through something and shift into system 2 thinking, it's like, it becomes like taxing on your system. So it's a very interesting way. It's like if you just sit there in the corner and try and meditate and have a great idea, it's very different than if you're out like doing something physical. Or like, that's why I enjoy sometimes my wife and I will play chess, because it will absorb us into something physical, but then we'll have conversation during it, and then you'll have cool breakthroughs. So it's like a way to preoccupy your mind instead of going into fear, doubt, worry, like resonating. I'm not saying you suppress that stuff. You have to do self-forgiveness for that. Like that's also what we talk about in the Self-Perfected group. You got to let that stuff go. But nonetheless, as you're in this process of becoming this world leader, this like best version of yourself where you can really make a difference, or local leader, whatever you want to call it, that's a good idea. Okay, so my iPhone storage is full, so I'm switching over to just audio to capture this. So as you're on this process of becoming like this leader, right? You want to add more information into how you see the world. And the power reading is a great way to do that. But then there's this other point here. I got this actually so I studied sociology. I went to university and I got my degree in sociology and psychology because I thought it was a cool way of looking at the world. But there's a concept called Dunbar's number. And Robin Dunbar, he would study these tribes, and he found that tribes throughout history typically would have about 150 people that you could trust and have a relationship with. After 150, it would kind of fragment into 2 tribes, which, that may be a limiting belief, right? It is, in many ways, but it is something to be aware of. But in the same way, you can have 150, let's say, close connections. You can have your 150 books in your library. So this is going to be a perspective shifter. There are some books that I have read 10 or 20 times. There are certain audios, like Your Wish is Your Command by Kevin Trudeau, that I've listened to probably 150 times. And again, some of this stuff that I'm saying, like Kevin Trudeau or even like Napoleon Hill, right? Those are some other books. You look those up and there's like the mainstream take on this stuff. And then there's the actual, like, you go investigate it for yourself. if you want to actually chat about any of this stuff, reach out to me. I can explain like why I would so boldly say, hey, this audio from Kevin Trudeau is so great, because this guy also he's kind of challenging, right? He's challenging status quo, and so he's gotten into trouble because he has a radio show, and he's really speaking out against big entities like the FDA, and so some people like that will get in trouble, right? I'm not here to speak out against the FDA or anything like that, but I do investigate everything and I go see it for myself before I cast judgment on it. And part of that then is me assembling my various tools in my library and like my way of looking at the world based on having a lot of different things I can pull from and keep going back to. So some of these books I've read 10, 20, 30 times because, and I don't reread it nitty gritty every single time, but I keep going back to it as a reference piece because you change every time. There's a Heraclitus quote where he says, no man steps into the same river twice. One, because it's not the same river. Two, because he's not the same man. The same way, no person rereads the same book exactly twice. Yes, it's the same words, but you're a different person. You have new issues you're facing. You have new problems you're facing. So it's like, it's a very cool way of looking at it. You have new responsibilities, Don't fall into the trap of now just sitting there and fucking reading all day, right? That would be stupid. I think you can see through that. But an hour a day reading can expand your perspective with the presumption here that you're actually now holding yourself to real principles, holding yourself to self-honesty, because you're going to see a lot of these books are misguided, but there's gold in them, right? Remember, move through the dirt, find the gold. So this Dunbar's number, 150, I've been working on assembling more or less of my 150. And what's fun about this then is this last point I want to bring up. So I'm rereading the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. Awesome author. He explains, I might butcher it, but he explains how for years, like he had read thousands and thousands of books for years. And then it prepared him for this one moment. It's like Genesis moment for him, where he placed a couple of the right moves with his investments, and he profited massively off the Black Swan event, which was 2008. And so in the same way, it's like, why does Warren Buffett, read for 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day? Because he's constantly absorbing this information to make a couple wise decisions. He has the vocabulary for it. So there's this other point I want to bring in from the Nassim Taleb book, where he has such a cool way of phrasing things. It's like there's a whole new level of like literature that I've begun to appreciate. And what it is he gives this example from this medieval philosopher, Buridan is his name, John Buridan or something, some French name. And it's called Buridan's Donkey. And Buridan's actually the guy who came up with the idea of a thought experiment. But Buridan's Donkey is this example that he gives where imagine you have a donkey and they're stuck equally between they're thirsty and they're hungry. So you got this donkey like in the desert, and 100 feet to the right is grass and 100 feet to the left is water. And the donkey is like glitching because it's like, I need water, I need food, I need water, I need food. And he's stuck. And he's literally going to die if he doesn't shift, if he doesn't get out of that. But the donkey's like stuck there in this like algorithmic process, right? So now let's say a little bit of randomness is injected into the system. A bird flies by and swoops right in front of his face, and it gets him to shift his head. And all of a sudden he goes, okay, it's actually easier to get the water now. Boom, and goes to get the water. That little stroke of randomness actually saved the donkey's life. I know that's a hypothetical situation, but I think you see where I'm going with this. When you go through your day, sometimes you get stuck in just the bullshit, right? You're all worried, you're stressed, you're thinking about this, thinking about that. It's like this stuckness. That's where we're at collectively. We've created a world where we're literally on the brink of freaking World War III. Like, people are getting canceled left and right. Like, you can't even tell what's real anymore online. There's deep fakes. There's all this shit. And we've stuck ourselves. So the purpose of this video here, and audio now, is, and the purpose of you developing your library is that now you have different parts of, like, little injections of randomness into the system that can now shift you in a new way. That's why when you go travel, it can be so freaking helpful because you wake up in a different hotel room. You wake up in and you brush your teeth in a different mirror, and like you eat different food, and like there's all these changes. So there's more randomness that now serves to wash away, it's like actually more noise, which serves to strengthen the signal of what's actually important. So sometimes you'll have huge breakthroughs, even just getting to the airport. Like when you're really pushing yourself, man, travel is like one of the greatest things. That's why we do our events. We have an event in Miami called Enter the 1%. And if you want to be elite and talk with people who think about this kind of thing, you should get there. Or if you're watching this in the future, like just the Self-Perfected Events, selfperfectedevents.com. But really, this is perfecting yourself. And the more you can utilize randomness effectively to shift yourself and then stick with your principles, man, you become really elite. And that's who I am. That's who I like to surround myself with. And that's who I invest my time with, is people like that, thinking like this. And it's amazing. So, yeah, do it.